Okay, Geography Lesson 1. You will need this in front of you. So Lesson 14, we're going to run through what we're doing for this activity for this week. And this will be broken into 4 short, half-hour lessons. And I'll have an introduction for them. But let's go through it together and see what we're actually going to do over the course of this week. So this week we are looking at cultural diversity. Let me run through and read this first part and follow along with me on this particular document that you have. So, the world's cultural diversity. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories and cultures. In this lesson, students are asked to consider cultural characteristics in Australia in comparison to cultural characteristics of selected countries across the world. This comparison supports learning about how the diversity of places is influenced by human and environmental characteristics, and will include references to Aboriginal peoples and Torres Strait Islander peoples' histories and cultures. There's much to know and learn about Aboriginal peoples and Torres Strait Islander peoples' histories and cultures. Participating in these ways of learning and knowing will be an exciting experience. It will be a journey of discovery and new ways of learning, new knowledge and new and interesting texts. Be aware, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, that this unit may contain images, voices and names of people who have now passed on or are deceased. So, let's go through this sheet and have a look about what we will be doing over the next 4. So, we have at the start here listed some resources which we will be using and some key terms. We do have access to the key terms in the glossary, so if you get stuck on anything, refer to that glossary. We will come back to this, but we're going to define what cultural diversity means and all the questions about how that might relate to it. Activity 1, we're basically looking at how we can identify different characteristics of different cultures in these pictures, and we're going to make a comment about that. Remember that a characteristic is something along the lines of how would we describe things that we're noticing or things that we're seeing. So is it hairdos, is it the things that they wear, is it the things that they eat, is it their behaviours, or things like that. That's what we mean when we're talking about characteristics. Question 2. So when we move into question 2, it might be lesson 1, it might be lesson 3. We will say when that will be. This is what we'll be doing for that. So there are different views here on this sheet, and this is the sheet in front of you. These different views are held by different people, or different children in this instance, around cultural diversity. You need to basically use the word bank that we have here to explain in your words what you think cultural diversity means. Remember, we spoke about diversity being that word that means difference, so make sure we think about that when we get to that question. Remember, this is not stuff that we are doing all in one day, or all in one lesson. We have spread this over the course of this week. So, we will be getting to a video, and very likely we're going through that video today, where we'll investigate cultural diversities and the characteristics of different places at national scale, so at a country-based scale. That's the video they're going to be watching there, cultural characteristics. We'll have a little bit of chat about that too. Question 4, we're going to actually compare Vietnam and Somalia, 2 countries. And we have a sheet that relates to that. So our sheet 13 we will need. And we won't be doing that for a couple of lessons. I think lesson 3 we'll be doing that on. So we don't need to worry about that now, but that is what we will be doing when we get to that. We'll be looking at things that are different, things that are similar, and things that are different again in Somalia versus Vietnam. So as we go down through, we have a final activity on pages 7 and 8. There is a table here that basically explains a couple of characteristics of each of those countries, and that allows us to make those comparisons. As I roll down through question 6, it says which country is more culturally diverse, Vietnam or Somalia? Write a short paragraph and support your conclusion with evidence from the data shown in table 1. And sentence starters have been provided, which is awesome. We love our sentence starters, they make life a lot easier. We will go through that a lot more in depth when we actually get to that, and that will be lesson 4, so that's a couple of lessons away. So, that being said, we've run through this sheet. We know what to expect over this week for geography. Now it says one lesson, but we've broken it up over the course of our four short little 20.5-hour lessons. So we have a video now. I'll play that one through, and we're going to have a bit of a chat about that as we go. So wait a moment for it to load. And if you have this video yourself, you can pause it when you need to, and you can watch it with us.
In this video, you will learn about cultural characteristics and cultural diversity. Let's start by defining the word culture. So what is culture? Culture is simply a way of life shared by a group of people. It is a shared set of customs, habits, beliefs, social organisation, and ways of life that characterise different groups and communities. If a group of people does things in a certain way with similar beliefs and similar values, that is considered to be their culture. Similar religions, customs, and celebrations are also part of a people's culture.
We might even talk about culture as in culture of a school, which would be on a more local, individual, smaller level. Have a think now for me, pause the video, about what things you think are part of the culture at our Tagan State School, and what things you think are important in terms of what beliefs do we all share, at least about how we conduct ourselves while we're at school. I'm sure you can think of a couple.
As you have learned, we can measure the demographic, economic, and social characteristics of places and use these measurements to investigate places. We can also measure the cultural characteristics of places. Language is part of people's culture. It is how people communicate. Many different languages are used around the world. There are also diverse languages used in many countries or regions. Can you think of a country or region which has more than one language spoken?
Pause the video. I'm going to get you to actually think of three. Can you think of 3 countries that would have more than one language? You're probably in one right now. When you thought of your 3, continue.
We can measure the diversity of languages used by people around the world by collecting data. We can represent this data in pie graphs. In Singapore, the 4 official languages are Mandarin, English, Malay, and Tamil. But there are also a number of other languages spoken, including other members of our learn about our culture. Culture is something that we learn from the people who live with us and near us. Our mothers and fathers, grandparents, other members of our family, our friends, our teachers, and our neighbours. We learn a system of beliefs, values, and practices as we grow up. These beliefs and values are part of our cultural traditions. We share our culture with a group of people, often the people we grow up with. Culture affects the things we do, including many of our behaviours. Just as each culture is different, each individual within the culture is different as well.
Again, so we spoke a minute ago about the culture within our school, at Tagan State School, alluding to the things that we believe collectively, so things that we all have in common in terms of how we think we should be acting and behaving, things we all believe together. I asked you to write down 3, I'm going to get you to do the same thing about your family. What are 3 things that you value in your family that you think speaks to the culture, I guess, within your family, for lack of a better term. So making a similar note, they might be similar or different to what our Tagan values were, or our Tagan cultural values that you wrote down were. But let's see if you can identify 3 things that your family particularly value.
Another characteristic of culture is how people shelter, clothe, and feed themselves. Food is a great example of how cultures in different parts of the world differ. Look at the examples shown for each place here. The food people eat in different places often relates directly to what ingredients are available in that place. For example, Greek cooking uses a lot of seafood because many people in Greece live near the sea. People also create homes and clothing out of materials in their environment. The style of shelters and clothing is also influenced by the climate in which people live. Shelter, clothes, and food are part of culture. Another important part of culture relates to religion and the beliefs of people. There are many different religions around the world, such as Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. There may be many religions practiced by people within a country, region, or community. Religion is a cultural characteristic that can be measured to investigate diversity. This map shows the diversity of religions across the world. Culture also includes how people entertain and how they investigate diversity.
The reason I've gone back there is I want us to have a close look at this map. Now, if you're playing this video yourself, pause it, obviously, and let's have a look at what we have in the key here. We have our different religions listed: Islam, Judaism, Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikh, and other. So we can see that the spread around different parts of the globe is interesting. We can see that there are certain areas that are featured with a lot of one particular type of religion, but then we have other areas that are smaller inside here, but they have more of a mix of religions. And that's an interesting point to know, is what part of the world is usually, or do we find, somewhat connected with what type of religion, and what would be the reasons for that, I wonder. It's an interesting point to know. See if you can have a think about any patterns you can see on that video, or on that map there, I should say.
Map shows the diversity of religions across the world. Culture also includes how people entertain and how they enjoy being entertained. The music, dance, art, and sport that is shared by a group of people form a part of their culture. Culture includes how and what people celebrate. For example, the Mid-Autumn or Moon Festival in Beijing, Quinceañera celebrations in Mexico, the Holi Festival in India, and Children's Day in Japan. What special days do you celebrate in your family or community? Culture is also how people connect to the past and present through their customs and traditions. A custom is a special activity that has usually been practiced for a long time by a group of people, like this Japanese tea ceremony. Customs like this one often have special meaning to the people who practice them. Traditions are customs or beliefs that are handed down from one generation to the next, like the bar mitzvah. People of the Jewish faith hold these ceremonies as an important tradition that symbolizes growing up. So then, what do we mean by the term cultural diversity? It is the great variety of customs, habits, beliefs, social organizations, and ways of life that characterize different groups and communities.
That's it for today's lesson. What I would like you to do to finish off is, we've paused here, and I'd like you to read what this definition of cultural diversity means. Remember that diversity word meaning difference. And I would like you, in your own words, one sentence only, to list or to write your own definition of what you think cultural diversity or cultural differences means. One sentence, that's it. That will be it. Lesson 2, we're going to start to move through that workbook, questions 1 and question 2. Remember, at any time, you can go back and watch this video. So you can go back and watch number 1, or you can go back and watch this video and refresh your memory if it helps you for the questions to come. Talk to you soon.